My sister got a dream trip to Europe. All I got was ignored and overlooked, so I walked away and let them realize who had been supporting everything all along. I don't think I'll ever forget that birthday. It started like every other. My dad flipping pancakes in the kitchen, my mom humming along to some old pop song from her youth, and my sister Claire already glued to her phone laughing at whatever her friend sent her. The smell of syrup and butter filled the air, but underneath it, EA could feel something else. Something that had been building for years. A quiet imbalance that I'd learned to live with. The kind that made you question whether love could ever be conditional. My name's Dylan, I'm 19, and until that morning I didn't realize just how far my family's favoritism would go. To understand what happened, you need to know how things usually worked in our house. Claire, 2 years older than me, was the golden child. She was the type who could forget to do the dishes and somehow get praised for being too busy studying. I, on the other hand, could spend an entire weekend helping Dad fix the porch or repaint the garage and get told I should contribute more around the house. It wasn't just small stuff either. It was woven into everything. If Claire needed money for a school trip, they'd find a way. If I asked for gas money to get to my part-time job, suddenly money doesn't grow on trees. Still, I told myself that's just how families are. Everyone has their roles, their blind spots. I didn't hate them. I didn't even resent Claire, at least not yet. She wasn't cruel, just oblivious. She based it in their affection like it was natural, like it was air she was entitled to breathe. I'd learned to find validation elsewhere, mainly through my freelance work. I'd started doing graphic design and small website projects when I was 16. At first, it was just pocket money. But by the time I turned 18, it had become something real. I was pulling in enough to help with bills, groceries, even a chunk of the mortgage when my dad's hours got cut. They never really asked where the money came from, just accepted it when I offered. I didn't mind. Helping them felt good. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd start to see me differently. That hope shattered on my 19th birthday. I remember Dad calling everyone to the living room after breakfast. There were presents on the coffee table, all wrapped neatly, a small pile on one side and one huge gift bag on the other. My name was written in small, neat handwriting on two of the little ones. Claire's name was sprawled across the big bag in gold lettering. "All right," Dad said, smiling. "Let's start with our birthday boy." I sat down, already trying to suppress that weird, sinking feeling in my chest. I didn't expect much. Maybe a sweater, maybe something small but thoughtful. Mom handed me a card first. Inside was a $20 gift card to a coffee shop I rarely even went to. I smiled anyway. "Thanks," I said, trying to sound genuine. Mom looked at me with that expression parents have when they're convinced they're teaching you something valuable. "We know it's not much, sweetheart," she said, "but you've got to learn that not everything is about gifts. Gratitude is what makes life rich." Dad nodded like she just quoted scripture. "Exactly. You're becoming an adult now. Dylan, it's time to appreciate the simple things." I forced a chuckle and nodded. I could feel Claire watching me from the couch, smirking a little. Then Mom turned to her. And now, for Claire's surprise, she said, her eyes lighting up. Claire tore into the giant bag, tissue paper flying everywhere until she pulled out a sleek envelope. When she opened it, her jaw dropped. "No way," she gasped. "A trip to Europe. 2 weeks in Italy and France." Dad announced proudly, clapping her on the back. "You've been working so hard, sweetheart. You deserve the world." Then he actually said it. He hugged her and whispered loud enough for me to hear, "You deserve the world." That sentence stuck in my head like a splinter. I sat there holding a $20 gift card and a lecture about gratitude while my sister was handed a dream vacation. Everyone was laughing, hugging, taking pictures. I just sat there smiling tightly, pretending my throat wasn't closing up. Later, while they were packing her travel essentials and talking about sightseeing in Rome, I went upstairs. I sat at my desk staring at my laptop, the same laptop that paid the bills they bragged about keeping up with despite tough times. I checked my bank account. The last deposit from a client had hit the night before. I'd made enough to cover another month's mortgage, but this time I didn't feel proud. I just felt stupid. That night after dinner, Dad came into my room. "Hey, bud," he said, leaning on the doorframe. "You were a bit quiet earlier." "Everything okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, just tired." He smiled faintly. "You know, one day you'll thank us for not spoiling you. Claire's trip isn't about money. It's about recognizing hard work, right?" I said, keeping my tone even. Hard work. He didn't catch the bitterness. He just nodded and patted the doorframe before leaving. "Get some rest." When he left, I sat there for a long time. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed up coding websites, designing logos, fixing their finances when they didn't even know what was due. I thought about the way Mom had smiled at Claire that morning. so full of pride. I realized something then. It wasn't just favoritism, it was blindness. They didn't see me. Not really. To them, I was a safety net, a backup plan, a quiet son who didn't complain. So I made a decision. Around midnight, I started packing. Not dramatically, just quietly, methodically. Laptop charger, clothes, essentials. I didn't even leave a note. I'd been saving money for months thinking I might move out by summer. I just hadn't planned for it to happen overnight. But sitting there, surrounded by the faint sound of Claire laughing downstairs as she showed Mom some travel vlog about Paris, it suddenly felt like the only thing that made sense. By 1 a.m., I was gone. I rented a small studio apartment in the city. Nothing fancy but mine. The next morning, I turned off location sharing and blocked their access to my online accounts. For once, I didn't feel guilty. For a few days, there was silence. Then the call started. First, a few missed calls from Mom, then a text from Dad. "Where are you?" "We need to talk." I ignored them. But by the end of the week, my phone was buzzing nonstop. They weren't angry anymore. They were panicked. I finally answered one evening just to see what they wanted. "Dylan," Mom's voice cracked through the line. "We can't make the mortgage payment. The account's empty." "What happened?" I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. "What happened?" I repeated softly. I stopped paying it. There was silence, then a sharp inhale. Stopped. "What do you mean?" "You stopped. You've been covering it since February. We thought that I'd keep doing it forever," I said, without you even noticing, without a thank you, without even a card that wasn't about learning gratitude. Dad's voice came on rough and trembling. "Dylan, son, this isn't funny. We have bills. We have responsibilities." So did I. I cut in and I handled them alone. I could hear the panic in their voices turning into something else. Guilt maybe, or realization, but I didn't let them speak. I learned gratitude. "All right," I said quietly, "just not the kind you meant." And then I hung up. That was the last time I heard their voices for a long while. But what happened after that? That's when things really got complicated. Because when people lose the person they took for granted, they start to see just how much they relied on them. And my parents, they were about to learn that lesson in the hardest way possible. The first week after I left was the quietest my life had ever been. No footsteps outside my door, no passive-aggressive family meetings, no constant reminders that I should try to be more like my sister. My new place was tiny, just a studio with beige walls, a cracked window frame, and a mattress on the floor. But I loved it. It was freedom. For the first time, every sound in the room was mine. The soft hum of my laptop, the click of my keyboard, the boiling of cheap instant noodles. Threw myself into work. Clients poured in, mostly small businesses who needed websites or ad designs. Word of mouth spread fast because I actually cared about the projects. I wasn't rich, but I was stable, and more importantly, I was in control. My parents didn't give up easily, though. After I hung up that night, they texted every day. At first, they tried guilt. "We can't believe you'd abandon your family like this. Your sister's been crying nonstop, Dylan. She misses you. Do you have any idea how hard things are for us right now?" Then came manipulation disguised as care. "We just want to know you're safe. You can stay mad, but please come home for dinner. Let's talk it out." I didn't answer. I'd said everything I needed to. But one night, about 2 weeks after the birthday, my sister texted me. Her message popped up while I was finishing a logo design. "Claire, hey, are you really not talking to Mom and Dad?" Me, "Not right now." "Claire, they're freaking out. You kind of blindsided them." Me, "Did they tell you why, Claire? They said you're overreacting. That it's just money stuff." Me, "Yeah, I figured they'd say that." She sent a long pause, then another text. "Claire, look, I know the Europe thing looked bad, but it's not like I asked for it. They surprised me." I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. She was right. She hadn't asked for it, but she also didn't hesitate to flaunt it. Her Instagram was full of posts about manifesting your dreams and hard work paying off while I sat in my one-room apartment eating noodles. Me, "I know you didn't, but it's the pattern. Claire, you get everything. I get lectures. Claire, that's not true. Me, you got a trip to Europe. I got a coffee card and a speech about gratitude. Claire, you're being dramatic. Me, maybe, but I'm also free now." She didn't reply. I think that was the first time I'd ever stood up to her without apologizing after. 2 days later, Mom showed up at my apartment. I was in the middle of a client call when someone started pounding on the door. I muted my mic, expecting maybe a package delivery, but no. It was her voice, trembling with a mix of frustration and concern. "Dylan, open the door, please." I hesitated, then opened it halfway. She looked exhausted. Her hair was frizzed, eyes red, makeup smudged. It was like she hadn't slept properly in days. Mom, I said quietly, you shouldn't have come here. She stepped forward like she might push the door open, but I didn't move. We're worried sick. Your father hasn't been himself. Claire's about to leave for her trip and she's a mess because of all this. I blinked. She's a mess. Don't use that tone, she said sharply. You disappeared without a word. You left us to deal with Bill's responsibilities. You mean your responsibilities? I interrupted. She frowned. We're family, Dylan. We help each other. I let out a short laugh. Not because it was funny, but because of how absurd it sounded coming from her. I did help for months. I paid for things you didn't even notice. And when I stopped, you finally realized it. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Money isn't everything, right? I said, but apparently it's enough to send Claire to Europe. Her expression shifted. Guilt, then defensiveness. You're twisting things. That trip was a reward for her effort. She's been studying, working hard. I've been working since I was 16. I snapped, my voice rising for the first time. You just didn't care because it wasn't the kind of success you could brag about to your friends. The silence that followed was heavy. For a second, I thought she might actually apologize, but then she sighed and shook her head. You've changed, she said. You're bitter. This isn't like you. Maybe I finally stopped pretending. She stood there for a moment longer, then quietly said, We'll figure something out without you. And she left. I closed the door and leaned against it, shaking not from anger, just exhaustion. A few hours later, I got another text from Claire. Claire, what did you say to Mom? She came home crying. Me, the truth. Claire, you're tearing this family apart, Dylan. Me. No, I'm just not holding it together anymore. That night, I muted the group chat permanently. The next week was calm again, almost peaceful until my aunt called. Now my Aunt Laura is the kind of person who always hears things. She's the family's unofficial gossip hub. When she called, I knew it wasn't a check on me. It was to dig. Dylan. Honey, she said in that syrupy voice. Your parents are so worried. They said you moved out suddenly. What's going on? I hesitated. Just needed space. Well, she said, lowering her tone. They mentioned something about money problems. I didn't want to pry, but it sounds serious. I clenched my jaw. Maybe they should have thought about that before lecturing me about gratitude. She chuckled softly. Oh, you sound just like your dad when he's mad. I didn't respond. Well, she continued, families fight, but they always come back together, especially when one person realizes they overreacted. That word again, overreacted. It was the word everyone used when they wanted you to forget why you were angry. Yeah? I said flatly. We'll see. A few days later, my dad finally called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Dylan, he started, his tone carefully calm. Listen, I've been thinking. Maybe we said some things that hurt you. Maybe. I said, but he continued. You have to understand, we didn't mean to make you feel less important. We just wanted to teach you responsibility. I've been responsible, I said, for your mortgage. That's not fair, he said quickly. You offered to help. We never forced you. You never asked where it came from either. I said you just took it. He sighed. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. Come home. Let's talk face to face. We'll make things right. I hesitated. Something in his tone felt rehearsed. Too diplomatic. Is this about the mortgage? I asked. There was a long pause. It's part of it, he admitted. The bank's been calling. We just need a little help getting caught up. And there it was. The real reason. Dad, I said slowly. Do you realize how insane this sounds? You're asking your 19-year-old son to pay for your house again after ignoring him for years? I'm not asking, he said, his voice tightening. I'm saying we need to work together as a family. That's what family does. No, I said, that's what I did. And you called it ungrateful. He didn't answer. I could hear him breathing heavy and frustrated. You're being selfish, Dylan. We raised you. We gave you everything. I almost laughed. You gave me a gift card and a life lesson. Remember. That was the end of the call. He hung up without saying goodbye. Over the next few days, I started hearing from extended family, uncles, cousins, even a family friend, all with the same rehearsed concern. Hey, your parents are really struggling right now. You should forgive them. They're older. They make mistakes. It's just money, man. Don't let it ruin your family. I started to realize what was happening. They were spinning the story. I was the ungrateful son who abandoned his family when they needed him most. They left out the part where they'd been living off my work without even knowing it. And the worst part, Claire started chiming in publicly. She posted a photo from the airport with the caption, "Leaving for Europe, grateful for my amazing parents who taught me what love and sacrifice look like. The comments were filled with heart emojis and "you're so blessed" messages. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head. The lectures, the favoritism, the way they'd turn me into the villain because I stopped letting them take advantage of me. Then around midnight, another text came in, this time from an unknown number. Unknown. "Hey Dylan, this is Mr. Grant from the mortgage office. Your parents said you were still handling payments." I stared at the message for a long time. They'd given the bank my number, my personal number. Something inside me snapped. I realized this wasn't just neglect anymore. It was manipulation. They weren't trying to make things right. They were trying to drag me back into the same cycle of guilt and responsibility. And that was the moment everything shifted, because I decided that if they wanted to play games, I wasn't just going to sit back and watch anymore. They thought I was just a quiet kid who ran away after a tantrum. They had no idea I'd been keeping records, tracking payments, saving receipts, building something far bigger than they imagined. They'd mistaken kindness for weakness, but not for much longer. It's strange how betrayal doesn't always come with screaming or slamming doors. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like a soft knock in the middle of the night, unexpected, polite even. And by the time you open the door, it's already too late. That's how it felt when I realized what my parents and sister did next. After that call from the mortgage officer, I knew something wasn't right. I hadn't spoken to my parents in over a month, and I definitely hadn't authorized anything involving my name or money. So I called the number back. The next morning. "Hi, this is Dylan," I said. "I got a message last night about my parents' mortgage." The man on the line sounded surprised. "Ah, Mr. Collins. Yes, your parents mentioned you were their financial contact. We just needed to verify some recent activity." My stomach dropped. "Financial contact?" "Yes, sir," he said matter-of-factly. "Your name was added to the account last spring as a joint contributor. You've been listed for direct deposits toward mortgage coverage since then." I froze. "Added by who? Your father, I believe? It's in the records?" I could feel the blood rushing in my ears. "And what exactly was added?" He paused to scroll through his notes. "Well, originally it was just your contact information and routing number for the direct deposits, but about 2 weeks ago there was a request to link your savings account as a backup payment source." I nearly dropped the phone. "What?" "Yes," he continued calmly. "We were actually about to process a withdrawal when it was flagged. The name mismatch delayed it, but we'll need your approval too." I didn't let him finish. "Do not touch that account," I snapped. "I never authorized any of this." I hung up and just sat there staring at the wall. My parents had linked my personal savings account to their mortgage without asking. Somehow they had enough of my information, probably from when I helped them with online payments, to submit it as a shared household account. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't an emotional misunderstanding anymore. It wasn't about hurt feelings or favoritism. It was theft. I didn't even cry. I just went cold. After a few minutes, I called my bank. I explained everything, had them freeze the account, and changed every password I could think of: email, PayPal, design platforms, even my freelance payment portals. I spent the whole day locking my life down. That evening, as if on cue, I got a call from my dad. "Dylan," he said, voice tight. "Why did the mortgage payment bounce? The bank said something about unauthorized access." I took a breath, trying to steady my voice. "Because you tried to steal from me?" His tone changed instantly. "Watch your mouth." "No," I said, my voice rising. "You used my savings account. You tried to take my money without even asking." "That's not what happened," he said quickly. "It was a misunderstanding." "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't even try that." I called the bank. They said you submitted my account as a backup source. Do you even realize how illegal that is? There was silence on the other end for a few seconds before he finally said, "We did what we had to do." The bank was threatening foreclosure. "You're part of this family, Dylan. You should want to help." "Help?" I repeated, my voice trembling with anger. "You mean bail you out again without consent? You're blowing this out of proportion," he snapped. "You've always been so sensitive. You make a little money and suddenly think you're better than everyone else." I laughed bitterly. "Better? I've been carrying this family quietly for years, and you call me ungrateful. You didn't even ask. You stole from me." "Lower your voice," he barked. "You don't talk to your father that way." "Then act like one," I said, and hung up. For the first time, I didn't feel guilt after ending a call, just a deep, cold fury. But the next day, things got worse. When I opened my laptop to check my freelance portal, my main account was locked. It said, "Suspicious activity detected. Please verify your identity." I contacted support, and after an hour of back and forth, they told me someone had tried to change my recovery email. The request came from an IP address matching my parents' house. I felt my stomach twist. My dad might have been desperate enough to use my account to send payments, or worse, to access my income directly. That night, I drove back to the old neighborhood for the first time since moving out. I didn't go to their house. I parked across the street and just sat there. The windows were lit. Through the curtains, I could see my mom moving around the kitchen. My dad sat in his usual recliner typing on his laptop, and there sitting beside him was Claire. She'd come back from Europe early. I didn't even have to guess why. When I finally worked up the nerve to go to the door, my mom opened it almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting. Her face lit up for a second before she saw my expression. "Dylan," she said cautiously, "you shouldn't just show up like this." "I wouldn't have to if you hadn't tried to rob me," I said flatly. Her smile faded. "That's not fair. You make it sound so ugly." "It is ugly," I said. "You used my account information without permission. That's fraud." "Don't talk like that," she said sharply, glancing toward the living room. "Your sister can hear you." "Good," I said louder. "Maybe she'll learn what family ethics actually look like." Dad stood up, frowning. "You're making a scene." "I'm making a point," I shot back. "You've crossed every line there is. You went behind my back, tried to access my money, and then acted like I owed it to you." Claire stood up from the couch, folding her arms. "Can you calm down?" "You sound insane. It's just money." I turned to her slowly. "Easy to say when you're the one getting free vacations." Her eyes narrowed. "You're still bitter about that. God, you really can't let anything go." "I can let things go," I said quietly, "but theft isn't one of them." Dad stepped forward, his tone shifting to that calm, patronizing register he always used when he wanted to end an argument without actually addressing it. "Dylan, you need to understand this isn't just about us. This house belongs to all of us. You grew up here. That mortgage is as much your responsibility as ours." "No," I said, my voice steady. "It's not. I'm 19. I didn't sign that loan. You did. You made choices, and now you're trying to drag me down with you." He opened his mouth to speak, but I kept going. "You've been living beyond your means for years. The new car, the expensive gifts for Claire, the renovations, all while telling me there's no money to spare. You didn't want a family. You wanted investors." For a second, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Shame, maybe. But then he said, something I'll never forget. "Well, maybe if you hadn't moved out, we wouldn't be in this mess." That sentence broke something in me. I'd been carrying their debt, their pride, their guilt, and now they were trying to make me the reason for their downfall. "I can't believe you," I whispered. "You really think I'm the problem?" Mom's voice softened, almost pleading. "Honey, we just wanted to hold the family together. You left so suddenly. Your dad didn't know what else to do. He thought linking your account would buy us time." I stared at her, stunned. "Buy you time? With my money?" She nodded weakly. We were desperate. And that was the truth. Except desperation wasn't an excuse. It was a choice. They could have asked, but they didn't. They took because deep down they never saw me as separate. They saw me as theirs to use. I didn't yell. I just took a deep breath and said quietly, "I want every trace of my name removed from your finances. Mortgage, utilities, everything. You have a week." Dad scoffed. "Or what you'll call the police." I met his eyes. "If I have to." He laughed. A hollow, bitter sound. "You wouldn't dare. You'd ruin your own family." "I didn't ruin it. I said you did." I turned and walked out before I said anything worse. As I got in my car, I saw Claire watching from the window, her face hard and unreadable. For a second, I thought she might come after me, but she didn't. That night, couldn't sleep. My hands kept shaking as I replayed the conversation over and over. The betrayal wasn't just about money. It was about trust, about realizing the people who raised you could justify hurting you if it meant keeping their comfort. The next morning, I started digging. I went through my emails, bank logs, and payment statements. That's when I noticed something else. Several transfers I didn't remember approving. Small amounts at first. $1,100 here, $200 there, sent to a household account under my dad's name. They've been taking from me for months, long before I moved out. Each new discovery was like another punch to the gut. I trusted them completely, helped them when they struggled, believed every word about learning gratitude, and all that time they've been quietly bleeding me dry. That realization didn't just hurt. It changed me because now it wasn't about getting away from them. It was about making sure they finally understood what it meant to lose something they took for granted. and I already knew exactly where to start. The days after discovering the transfers felt like falling into a fog, quiet, heavy, and endless. Every morning I woke up in that small apartment with sunlight filtering through the thin curtains, and for a few seconds everything felt normal. Then it would hit me all over again. My parents, my own family had been stealing from me for months. I wasn't angry at first, I was just numb. I'd always thought betrayal would feel explosive like rage or heartbreak. But this wasn't fire. It was frost. It crept into everything I did. The way I ate, worked, slept. I'd sit in front of my laptop staring at a blank canvas cursor blinking, and the thought would slide in. They didn't even ask. The work that once gave me pride now just felt like proof of my stupidity. Every dollar I'd earned, every late night I'd stayed up finishing a client's project had gone into their house, their life, their comfort, and they hadn't even seen me as a person, just a resource. I stopped answering emails for a while. I missed deadlines. My freelance profile took a hit. And one client even left a comment saying, "Talented but unreliable." It stung, but I couldn't even defend myself. I was too tired. My savings were almost gone by then. I transferred what was left into a new account, but after paying rent and food, it was shrinking fast. I'd never been reckless with money, but when your brain is spinning with betrayal, you stop thinking straight. I'd buy takeout. I didn't finish scroll online stores without buying anything and then feel guilty for wasting time. My phone was quiet for a few days, blessedly quiet until one afternoon when I got a text from Claire. "Claire, you're being dramatic again. Mom's a wreck. Me, she should have thought about that before lying to me." "Claire, you're really going to destroy our family over money." Me. "It's not about the money, Claire." "Then what is it about, Dylan? You've always had to make everything about you." That one hurt more than I wanted to admit. I stared at it for a long time before typing back. Me. "You wouldn't understand. You've never had to earn anything on your own." She didn't reply, but 10 minutes later I saw her post something on Instagram. "A family that sticks together can survive anything." The photo was of her mom and dad sitting at a restaurant, smiling, laughing like nothing had happened. That's when the anger started to replace the numbness. They weren't suffering. They weren't reflecting. They were moving on together, painting me as the villain who abandoned them, and I knew what that meant. They were telling everyone their version of the story. I could already imagine the whispers at church or among family friends. Poor Colin's family. Their son turned against them after all they did for him. The idea made me sick. A few nights later, I got another call from an unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it, but I was half asleep and answered without thinking. "Dylan," it was my dad's voice. "Listen, I know you're angry, but this is getting out of hand. We can't afford the next payment. You've made your point. Now come home." I stayed silent for a few seconds. He sighed. "Don't punish your mother for my mistakes. She's been crying every night." "Has she?" I said softly. "Crying because she feels guilty or because the money stopped?" There was a long pause. "Do you really want to destroy your family?" He said finally. "You think this makes you strong, but it's selfish. We gave you everything, Dylan. Food, clothes, a roof. You took everything I interrupted. You used me, Dad, and you didn't even see it. You thought, because I didn't complain, it meant I didn't notice." His tone hardened. "You're talking like a stranger, like someone poisoned you against us." I almost laughed. "I didn't need anyone to. You did that yourself." And then I hung up again. That night, I couldn't sleep. The walls of my apartment felt closer than usual. I kept thinking about what he said. "We gave you everything." It was the kind of line parents used when they wanted to rewrite history. But the truth was simpler. I'd given them everything. They just didn't want to admit it. The next morning, I walked around the city aimlessly. It was one of those crisp mornings where the air feels too clean, too indifferent. People passed by carrying coffee cups, chatting about their weekends, and I felt invisible among them. I wanted to disappear completely, just vanish, start over somewhere far away. But I couldn't, not yet, because even though I was at my lowest, something inside me had shifted. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was exhaustion, but I knew I couldn't keep being the quiet one anymore. Still, before I could do anything, I had to fix myself. I started small, woke up early again, cooked breakfast instead of ordering, forced myself to take new freelance jobs. It wasn't easy. Some mornings I just stare at the screen, unable to type, but I pushed through. One design, one invoice, one day at a time. Meanwhile, the messages from home kept coming, cycling through every stage of emotional manipulation: guilt, shame, nostalgia. "We miss you, Dylan. Remember when we used to watch movies on Friday nights? Your sister leaves for her second trip soon. You should say goodbye before she goes." Every text felt like a hook trying to pull me back, but I'd learned something important by then. Silence can be power. When people can't provoke you, they start to show who they really are. And sure enough, after a week of no replies, the tone shifted again. Dad, if you're not going to help, don't expect to be welcomed back. Mom, we can't believe you turn your back on us like this. Claire, you're jealous. That's all this is. Jealous. That word burned. I wasn't jealous of her trip or her gifts. I was jealous of how easy her life was, how she could hurt people and still be loved unconditionally. I'd spent years earning scraps of approval, and she got applause for breathing. One night, I scrolled through old photos on my phone. There was one from my 17th birthday. Me holding a cake, smiling awkwardly while my parents stood behind me, arms around Claire. They looked so proud, but not of me. I remember that night vividly. My dad spent half of it bragging about Claire's grades while I sat quietly nodding. I'd worked 2 jobs that summer. They never asked why. That memory hit me like a wave. All those years of small dismissals brushed off, effort's guilt disguised as love. It wasn't random, it was conditioning. They'd raised me to be useful, not loved. I shut my phone off and just sat there in the dark, gripping the edge of my bed. For the first time in my life, I cried not because I missed them, but because I realized I'd been craving something they were never capable of giving. The next day, I called Aunt Laura. She was the only one who hadn't texted me directly since everything blew up, which made me suspicious. Aunt Laura, I said carefully, did my parents say anything to you about me? She hesitated. Well, they're upset. They said you cut them off financially and left them in a bad spot. Did they mention why? No, just that things got tense. They didn't go into details. Of course they didn't. They wanted sympathy, not truth. Then she added, they told the family you moved out because you couldn't handle responsibility, that you're going through a selfish phase. I felt something twist inside me. They weren't just lying to me. They were rewriting the narrative for everyone else. Thanks for telling me, I said quietly. I just wanted to know. Dylan, she said gently, whatever's going on, don't do anything rash. They're still your parents. I know, I said. That's the problem. After I hung up, I went for a walk. The sky was gray and heavy, the kind that threatens rain but never delivers. I stopped at a small park and sat on a bench watching people pass by, families, couples, friends, laughing. It all felt distant, like I was behind glass. But somewhere in that stillness, a thought formed, a calm, dangerous kind of clarity. They wanted control. They wanted me to come crawling back out of guilt or fear or loneliness. But what they didn't realize was that the only thing left for them to lose was the illusion of control itself. And that was something I could take away quietly. I didn't have to yell. I didn't have to fight. All I had to do was prepare. Over the next week, I started gathering everything I'd need. Every invoice, transaction, email, and document showing the money trail between my freelance work and their mortgage payments. I backed them up in multiple folders labeled by date and client. I didn't even know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew I needed proof. Each file I saved felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Still, even with a plan slowly forming, the loneliness was brutal. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about the kid I used to be. The one who'd work late just to surprise his parents with an extra payment, who thought love meant keeping everyone comfortable except himself. That kid was gone now. By the time I finished organizing everything, I realized something else. They weren't just taking my money, they were taking my peace. And if I wanted to get it back, I'd have to show them exactly what happens when the quiet one stops playing nice. But before that moment came, before revenge even crossed the line into action, I had to face one last blow, one that would push me to my breaking point. And it started with a single phone call from Claire. It's funny how sometimes rock bottom gives you the clearest view of who you are. After that night on the park bench, I decided I was done letting my family define me, done letting their guilt dictate my choices, done shrinking myself to fit their comfort. The morning after Claire's call came through, I didn't pick up right away. I let it ring. I watched her name flash across my phone like an echo from a past life. When it finally stopped, I sat in silence for a few seconds. And then for the first time in months, I smiled. Because for once, I didn't need to answer. Instead, I opened my laptop, cracked my knuckles, and went back to work. At first, it wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. I had rent to pay, savings to rebuild, and a reputation to fix. The last few months had hit my freelance business hard, but I still had talent and a name that a few loyal clients remembered. I reached out to every one of them personally, apologized for the delays, and offered to redo or update their work free of charge. That one act, just taking accountability and showing up, started a ripple I didn't expect. One of my old clients, a small clothing brand owner, called me back the next day. Dylan, she said we just landed a partnership with an influencer. I could use a full rebrand. You up for it? I was. And that project became my turning point. For weeks, I poured myself into that brand. New logo, clean website, professional mock-ups. I lost sleep, skipped meals, but not out of stress this time, out of drive, out of purpose. When the influencer finally posted the launch, their site blew up. Sales tripled in a week. The brand owner messaged me, "You did this. You're a genius." That message hit me harder than any compliment my family had ever given, because this time it wasn't about obligation. It was earned. Word spread quickly in the small business circuit. Suddenly, I had DMs and emails from boutique owners, coaches, small agencies all wanting help with design or websites. It was chaos, but the kind of chaos that felt like progress. I raised my prices. They still kept coming. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I was building. I used part of my new income to rent a bigger apartment, not flashy but bright and open, with a real workspace and a tiny balcony overlooking the city. I furnished it with things that were mine, my desk, my shelves, my little coffee setup, no hand-me-down furniture, no guilt attached to anything. I remember sitting there one night, cup of coffee in hand, watching the city lights shimmer and thinking, this is what freedom feels like. Meanwhile, I stayed completely silent with my family. Not a call, not a text. I didn't even check their social media, but I knew they were watching me. Claire still had me blocked, but I saw one of her friends had liked a post of mine, one showing my new workspace with the caption, "Built this from scratch." 2 hours later, I got a text from Dad. "Dad, you seem to be doing well. Glad to see you're figuring things out." Me, I am. "Dad, maybe you can stop holding grudges and come by for dinner sometime. We can talk like adults." I didn't reply because talk like adults was his code for let's pretend nothing happened. The truth was, my silence was the conversation. It said everything I needed to. Over the next few months, things only got better. My freelancing snowballed into something bigger, a small design studio of my own. I hired a few part-timers from an online community. People like me who were good at their craft but underpaid and underestimated. We called ourselves Kite Studio. I didn't even tell my family about it. They didn't deserve to know. We started picking up real clients, startups, influencers, small e-commerce brands. I built systems, hired a bookkeeper, learned how to market properly. There were nights I fell, asleep at my desk, but I woke up proud instead of drained. I could feel myself becoming someone new. Then one day a message came through that made me pause. It was from an old high school teacher, Mrs. Porter. She'd seen my designs online and wanted me to speak to her business class about freelancing and independence. Standing in front of that classroom weeks later talking about contracts, creative freedom, and financial control. Something clicked. Was confident, articulate. People listened. Afterward, one of the students came up to me and said, "I wish my parents supported what I do like yours must have supported you." That one stung a little, but I smiled anyway. Sometimes I said, "You have to support yourself first." That became my quiet motto. I stopped defining myself by what my family did to me. I started defining myself by what I built despite them. Still, that didn't mean I forgot. Not even close. Because every time I logged into my bank app, I'd see the old account listed below, frozen empty, still carrying their name next to mine. It was a quiet reminder that unfinished business was waiting. Then a few weeks later, my past came knocking again, literally. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was working on invoices when someone buzzed my door. When I checked the intercom, I nearly dropped my coffee. It was Claire. She was wearing designer, sunglasses, holding a shopping bag, looking exactly how I remembered her, polished, untouchable, and oblivious. I almost didn't open the door, but curiosity got the better of me. When I did, she smiled like nothing had ever happened. "Hey, stranger." I crossed my arms. "What do you want, Claire?" She walked in without waiting for an invitation, looking around like she was inspecting the place. "Wow, this is nice. Way better than I expected." "Yeah," I said, flatly. "I worked for it." She ignored the jab and sat on the edge of my couch. "Mom's been begging me to come talk to you. She's worried. You're still not answering her calls." "I'm not interested," I said. She sighed like I was the difficult one. "Dylan, this is getting ridiculous. They're your parents. You can't just cut them out forever." I looked at her carefully. "Did they send you here, or did you come on your own?" She hesitated just enough for me to know the answer. "They just want to make peace," she said softly. "Things have been hard. Dad's been stressed. The mortgage, Mom's health." "Stop," I said. "Don't start with guilt." "I'm not," she said quickly. I just think you're holding on to resentment for no reason. I laughed sharp and humorless. No reason. They stole from me, Claire. They took money from my account without asking. That's not a misunderstanding, that's a crime. Her expression hardened. You always have, to make everything sound dramatic. I stepped closer, voice low. Do you know what's dramatic? Having to freeze your own savings because your parents forged your information. She didn't respond. She just looked away, tapping her nails against her knee. Then she muttered, You always were overprotective of your money. Something in me shifted. Overprotective, I said slowly. You mean the money that kept the roof over your head for 2 years? That overprotective money. She looked up at me, finally losing her composure. You're so self-righteous, Dylan. You think you're the only one who's ever helped this family? You think because you made a few dollars online it makes you better than us? No, I said, calm now. It makes me independent. That's something you wouldn't understand. She stood up, her voice rising. You know what fines stay bitter, but when things fall apart again, don't expect us to come running to save you. I smiled faintly. You never saved me, I just finally stopped saving you. She glared at me, grabbed her bag, and stormed out. The second the door closed, I let out a shaky breath. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, from clarity. That conversation was the final push I needed. That night, I opened my laptop again. The folder with all my evidence, receipts, deposits, account links had been sitting untouched for months. I clicked it open and I realized something. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. They had built their version of me, the ungrateful, selfish son, and told everyone who'd listen. But I had the power to show who I really was. Not through shouting or arguments, but through proof. I didn't know exactly how yet. Maybe a legal report, maybe public exposure, maybe something more poetic, but one thing was certain. Their illusion of control was about to end. Because the thing about rising from rock bottom is once you climb high enough, you stop being afraid of falling. And I was higher than I'd ever been. I didn't wake up one morning thinking, today's the day I'll get revenge. It wasn't like that. It was slower, quieter, like realizing you've been holding your breath for months and finally deciding to exhale. Revenge didn't feel like fury anymore. It felt like focus. After Claire's visit, something inside me snapped into place. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to them. I was planning. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that my family's power over me had never come from money. It came from reputation, from control, from the image they projected to everyone around them. They cared more about looking good than being good. That was the weakness I could use. They had stolen my money, twisted the story, and painted me as the selfish son who abandoned them. But I had something stronger than words. Proof. Every payment, every invoice, every time I'd bailed them out when they were just a little behind. I had records going back 2 years, sitting neatly in a folder labeled Collins Financial Assistance. I'd even kept copies of their emails thanking me for helping out with the bills. I hadn't realized how much evidence I'd collected just by being responsible. I started by creating a digital timeline, each transaction, each bank transfer organized by date. Then I added screenshots of texts and emails, Mom asking for a little help with the utilities, Dad sending me his account number, Claire's Venmo request for rent money that she never paid back. It looked like a case file. And then, because I'm a designer, I made it beautiful. I formatted it into a clean, readable report. Dates, amounts, context. By the time I was done, it looked like a polished financial statement professional enough to hand to a lawyer. That was step 1. Step 2 was more delicate. I knew Aunt Laura was still the family's main gossip hub. If I gave her something, she'd spread it. She always did. But I couldn't just dump it on her. It had to look accidental, like she'd stumbled upon the truth herself. So I printed a few pages from the report, highlighted some key transactions, mortgage payment transfer, Dylan Collins household, $1,200, and slipped them into an envelope with a handwritten note that said, Since everyone's been asking what really happened, I thought it was time to show my side. No threats, no drama, just facts. Then I mailed it not to my parents, but to Aunt Laura. It took exactly 3 days. On the 4th day, my phone started blowing up. First, a text from Claire. Claire, what did you do? Me told the truth. Claire, you're destroying our family's reputation. Me, I'm not destroying it. I'm just not protecting it anymore. Then came the call from Mom. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Dylan, she said, her voice trembling. What did you send to Aunt Laura evidence? I said. Of everything you took from me. She gasped like I'd hit her. You're humiliating us. She's called everyone. The whole family thinks we're thieves. I stayed quiet. Let her talk. We were desperate, she continued. You're our son. You were supposed to help us, not turn us into villains. You turned yourselves into that, I said calmly. I just stopped covering for you. She started crying. I could hear Dad in the background shouting something muffled, probably demanding I take it all back. But I didn't, because by then it had already spread further than Aunt Laura. My cousin texted me saying half the family chat was in chaos. Some people were defending my parents. Others were stunned, saying they had no idea I'd been helping them financially. It didn't matter which side they took. The important part was that the truth was finally out. For the first time, my parents had to live with the consequences of their own actions without me shielding them. That alone felt like justice, but it wasn't over yet. A few days later, I went one step further. I scheduled an appointment with the bank manager, the same one who'd helped me freeze my old account months earlier. I brought the printed report and calmly explained everything. The unauthorized linking the forged account, accessed the stolen transfers. He read through the paperwork, eyebrows raised. You've got quite a case here, Dylan. Do you want to file a formal report? I hesitated. I don't want to press criminal charges, I said slowly. But I do want their names permanently removed from anything connected to me. Mortgage, savings, everything. He nodded. That can be arranged. It took a few signatures, some verification calls, and a lot of paperwork, but by the end of the week, I was officially free. My name was scrubbed from every joint account, every linked profile, every debt. They couldn't touch me anymore. When the confirmation email came through, I just stared at it for a long time, letting it sink in. For the first time in years, I didn't owe them anything. Not money, not explanations, not silence. That night, I walked to my balcony with a drink in hand, city lights glowing below, and just breathed. It was peaceful. No guilt, no noise, just peace. But of course, peace doesn't last long when people like my parents realize they've lost control. A week later, I got another call, this time from Dad. Do you realize what you've done? He growled. We can't even show our faces to the family. Your aunts turned everyone against us. I didn't do that. I said the truth did. He slammed the phone down after a few more angry words, but it didn't bother me because for once his anger didn't mean anything. It couldn't touch me anymore. Still, the silence that followed was strange. There was satisfaction, yes, but also a hollow space where family used to be. I didn't hate them. I didn't even want to destroy them. I just wanted them to see. And when the silence stretched for weeks, I thought maybe they finally did. Then one evening, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, but I recognized my dad's handwriting instantly. Inside was a single sheet of paper. We don't know how to fix this anymore. You've made your point. But if you think we can survive without you, you're wrong. You'll regret this when we lose everything. For a long time, I just stared at that letter, the words blurring. And then without anger or hesitation, I tore it in half. Because that was the moment I realized something deeper than revenge had happened. I hadn't just exposed them. I'd freed myself. They wanted me to feel guilty forever, to keep playing the role of the quiet, dependable son. But now every chain they tied me with, emotional, financial, familial, was gone. And as for them, they built their world on my back. Now they were learning how fragile it was without me holding it up, but they still hadn't learned the final lesson that was coming next. It took about 3 months for everything to fall apart for them. Not because of me, because the truth always eats through lies eventually. After that letter, I didn't reach out again. I focused on my studio, on my clients, on building a life that wasn't centered around people who drained me. But I still heard things. News has a way of finding you when people can't let go. It started with Aunt Laura again, naturally. She called one afternoon, her tone unusually somber. Dylan, she said quietly. I thought you should know. Your parents' house went up for sale. I didn't say anything. They couldn't keep up with the payments. The bank's been after them for months. They tried to refinance, but after the financial review, she hesitated. Let's just say your name missing from the paperwork didn't help. I nodded slowly. The information settling in like cold rain. I didn't feel triumphant, just resolved. They'll have to move in with a relative for a while, she added. They're embarrassed. Your mom barely leaves the house. Thanked her for telling me and hung up. I should have felt pity. Part of me did, but another part, the part that had spent years being invisible, belittled, and guilt-tripped, felt something closer to closure. Claire, of course, tried to spin it. I saw a post from her not long after. Hard times teach us who we really are. Grateful for family through it all. The comments were full of sympathy, but there was no trip to Europe this time. No flashy photos, no laughter. She'd gone quiet too. I knew why. The fallout from my report hadn't just hit my parents. It had exposed everything they'd done financially, including the extra credit cards in her name that Mom had quietly paid off using my transfers. When those payments stopped, so did her freedom. It was like watching a castle crumble from the inside. A month later, I ran into Mom unexpectedly at a grocery store. She looked older, thinner, smaller somehow. When she saw me, she froze eyes wide like she'd seen a ghost. "Dylan," she whispered. I almost walked past her, but something in me softened just a little, so I stopped. "Hi, Mom." We stood there for a moment, surrounded by the low hum of checkout lines and quiet chatter. She looked down at her hands. "Your father's been looking for work," she said finally. "Things have been hard." I know," I said. She swallowed hard. "We never wanted it to get like this. We just didn't think." "No," I said gently. "You didn't." Her eyes welled up. "I'm sorry," she said, voice breaking. "We should have treated you better. We should have asked instead of taking. You didn't deserve any of it." For a second, I didn't know what to say. I dreamed about hearing those words for years, but now that they were real, they didn't feel like victory. They just felt sad. "I forgave you a long time ago," I said quietly. "I just can't forget." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "That's fair." We stood there for a few seconds longer. Then I picked up my bag, nodded once more, and walked away. I didn't look back. That was the last time I saw her in person. We never had a dramatic reconciliation, no teary hug or heartfelt montage. Just that moment, two people standing in the frozen food aisle realizing they were strangers now. But life kept moving. My studio grew, I hired full-time employees, started working with bigger clients, real brands, even a couple of national campaigns. I built partnerships, spoke at events, and learned to love the quiet success that came from building something honest. Every once in a while, I'd get a message from a family member, someone checking in, someone trying to rebuild a bridge, but I never went back. I didn't need to. The peace of not being needed was better than any apology they could have given me. Months later, I got an email notification that caught me off guard. It was from the mortgage company. A final closure notice confirming the Collins property had been sold and the account settled. I stared at the screen for a long time. That house had been my entire childhood. It held every memory, good and bad, every version of me they'd ever ignored. And now it was gone. But instead of sadness, all I felt was lightness. Like I'd finally dropped a weight I'd been carrying for years. That night, I stood on my balcony again, city lights stretching out below the wind, cool against my skin. I thought about the kid I used to be, the one who sat in his room working late into the night, desperate for approval that never came. He was gone now. In his place stood someone who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I picked up my phone, scrolled through the contact list, and hovered over Dad. For a second, I thought about calling, saying something, maybe even a goodbye, but then I realized I already had. I deleted the contact. Then, looking out at the skyline, I whispered to no one in particular. I learned gratitude. "Dad, just not the kind you meant." And this time I actually smiled.